Okay, hello everyone. Jason here with Adam, back for a second go round. Good to see you again, my friend.
Hey, hey.
So last time we were making our Oscar predictions, and those may or may not have held true now. Still got a few more days to adjust those, but today it's all about our personal favorites. And so normally what I would do, and maybe you as well, sometimes you do top 20 or top 10, but we're going to do a top 19 of 2019.
Yeah.
It was an unusually great year for movies, in my opinion. I think you share that sentiment with me. And so we're just going to bounce it back and forth. We'll rip through this list, and some of these will be notable for those that are listening and watching. They've been in the media. Some maybe are some hidden gems that you may want to check out. So first of all, Adam, what variables or what makes a movie your favorite? Maybe let's just talk about how we determine our favorite. This isn't necessarily the best movies of the year, at least that's how I look at it, but it's my personal favorites and your personal favorites. So as you're determining what's your favorite, what are some of the variables you kind of look at?
Yeah, that's actually really changed for me over the years because I've been doing this since high school, blogging about my top 10, top 20, whatever, every year. And I know years ago I really felt that obligation to give credit to certain works of art that I know were remarkable, but maybe in hindsight didn't really hit me in a really powerful personal way. And so thankfully over the course of all these years, at some point in the last decade, I just sort of like realized I gave myself permission of just unashamedly, like I'm not going to make like a best of the year list and then like personal favorite list. Like it's just going to be one for me. And so whether it is a masterful work of art or a raunchy comedy with a heart, I realized that it really just needs to be a very personal, subjective thing for me of what were the stories that really lingered for me. What were the stories that I couldn't shake in terms of being hysterical and lovable or being disturbing and upsetting or it really, for me, a lot of the time really comes down to emotions for me. What was my emotional reaction? Because that's the power of cinema. It is this manipulative medium, and I like that about it. I think that's what makes it so powerful from sight and sound and what you can evoke in an audience. And so for me, obviously. For me, like theological themes and things like that really pop and resonate for me, and I can't shake that, and I can't deny that. Yeah, but so it's always that combination of just incredible works of art, philosophy or theology to chew on, and just like emotional, happy or sad emotional reaction, just that stuff that you couldn't shake or just lingers with you. That's what it boils down to for me.
Yeah, very much the same with me. It's the emotional reaction. I mean, you probably in both our lists are going to see a variety of genres on screen. Obviously, it needs to have strong performances in the film, and most of them are technically proficient. But the ones that really stick with me, and the other factor for me is not only my personal reaction, but the reaction of those maybe I viewed some of these with, or conversations I've had about these films with others. Those are things that I factor in as well. So we've sort of taken all those into consideration. Any notable absences on your list that maybe some people be like, WTF, how'd you leave that out?
Well, I mean, and certainly it's like that every year when it comes to the nominees for Best Picture and things like that. I always have friends comment when I post my top 20 of like, did you not see this one or that one? It's like, oh, I did. It didn't hit me in the heart in a big way. And so I think the more notable ones for me this year are, and these are good films. So, but they just weren't top 20 for me. And so films like Joker, films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, those are the two real big standouts that I can think of at the top of my head. I mean, certainly 1917. I shouldn't discredit that. That's a good film. But I certainly think Joker and Once Upon a Time are a step above that. But those were both, for me, I rate everything out of 5 stars, and that's how I kind of keep track of stuff. And those were both solid 3.5-star movies with Oscar caliber elements Oscar caliber cinematography or production or writing or performances, but as a cohesive whole, they weren't stories that really lingered and stuck with me, and so they just they sort of like are a little lower on the ladder.
Yeah, likewise, no Joker in mine. Although I did appreciate it, I liked it. It didn't make the top 20 or top 19. 1917, I was a tad bit disappointed with, given all the hype. Very technically proficient movie, but it just didn't have that emotional impact for me.
Yeah.
Didn't go deep enough with the sort of plot and the character development. Biggest disappointment of the year, Star Wars. Please tell me that's on your list.
You know it's not.
Yeah.
You and I both had very cathartic texting sessions after seeing that one. Didn't know what to do with ourselves.
Like, stop right now. They're not going to watch anything else we say because they loved it. That's
all
right.
That's right.
We appreciate and we'll respect your right to be wrong. All right. So why don't we dive in? Okay, one thing. How many of these do you think will be on both our lists? We haven't seen each other's lists.
Yep.
We're going in blind. We've talked about some of these films, so we have maybe to understand. How many of these 19 do you think will be on both of our lists?
Oh, man. Just things we've chatted about and knowing you. I think I'm actually just looking at my list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to say out of our top 19, I'm going to think there's at least 10 that we're going to have overlap.
I'll predict 11.
Okay, fair enough.
We'll see when we're done.
Yep.
Cool. All right, why don't you hit lead off? What's number 9? I know you had 20 prepared, but can you trim one down to 19, or you can mention 20 and 19 if you want.
No, I know. Let's
keep that one in.
Top 19 of 2019. I can definitely sort that out for sure. So I'm going to say 19 for me. Actually, I'm looking at my list and I've got my bottom 9 or 10 alphabetical. So I'll just ring it off the top of my head. Let's say number 19 is Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, which we talked about in a previous recording about intercultural films, and just in terms of, we had 3 amazing Marvel films this year. For a moment, Endgame was on there. For a moment, I thought about Far From Home, because Spider-Man Far From Home was like the most entertaining experience I had this year, and I saw it twice. Endgame was so satisfying, and I thought it was remarkable what the Russo brothers did. But Captain Marvel was a story and narrative set apart with far more powerful themes, some really remarkable, unique, distinct cinematic features in terms of style. So just Captain Marvel, I think, would be my number 19, because I really just admired it and loved it.
Yeah. So my 19, I really, really close to putting Endgame at 19. That was my favorite Marvel movie of the year. It did everything for me that Star Wars failed to do. It tied up everything nicely. But I don't know. I think maybe Mr. Scorsese cast his spell on me, and I just couldn't bring myself to putting a Marvel movie in the top 19. But you'll be happy I didn't, because my 19, maybe you won't be happy because it's quite a bit lower than yours, I'm sure. Little Women. Little Women is my 19.
Oh, man. Okay.
I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Little Women. It's not my go-to genre. My wife drags me kicking and screaming to watch Downton Abbey and some of these other period pieces that she adores.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated with what Greta Gerwig did with this story. I know you're going to have a lot more to say about this later on, because I know it's one of your top movies of the year.
Yeah.
But I thought she towed the line. She walked the tightrope of being sort of honoring the core of that beloved story, but making it something fresh, making it her own.
Yep.
Florence Pugh, for me, she stole the show in that movie. She was my favorite. Ronan, obviously, nominated as well. Strong cast. And and seeing the movie with 3 of my favorite women, my wife, my daughter, my grandmother, that sort of added to the experience. So Little Women, I was disappointed Greta didn't get a Best Director nomination.
For sure.
But, this has a shot at Best Adapted Screenplay, and rightfully so. So it's my 19.
Cool.
And I'll start with 18 then. My number 18 is my favorite documentary of the year. I don't know if you have any documentaries in your list, but I did include one this year, and it's For Sama. Not sure if you've seen that one.
I didn't get a chance to see that. It was on my list. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's widely available. You can watch it on YouTube. You don't need to have any streaming service.
Okay.
PBS Frontline released this on YouTube. And so basically what it is it's a story of this 26-year-old who's living in the heart of the war, the crises in Aleppo and Syria. And she records basically firsthand what's happening right there in that environment, and it's just heart wrenching. But it's probably the most important thing that needs to be watched this year, because this is real life. This is actually happening, and she's recording all this for her daughter named Sama, hence the title For Sama.
Right.
And so, again, we're both pastors if you're watching, and we can't help but think theologically. And I was watching this, I'm reminded of something Christ said. He said, the broad, talked about the broad and the narrow roads. And it was a reminder that this broad road leading to destruction, all this violence and evil, this is happening here now in the world. And yet here she is with her husband walking the narrow path. They're opening a hospital. They're caring for the wounded on both sides. Doesn't matter what their allegiances are. They're just caring for individuals. And she's doing this to pass on to the next generation, sort of this call to walk that narrow road. I found it as difficult as it was to watch. It was very important. I've been thinking about it every day since I've watched it. That's my number 18 for Samak.
All right. Well, my number 18, and of course you just a moment ago said we were pastors, and so I've got to give a little disclaimer with this one. But my number 18 was Long Shot. Long Shot with Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron. I'm a big fan.
I don't think pastors are allowed to watch that.
I know, right? So whenever I write a blurb about this kind of film, I always put the disclaimer that this is vulgar, this is crass, but this is a sincerity of heart and emotion, and that's what Seth Rogen and his writing partner Evan Goldberg. That's what they do so well. They do the raunchy, hard R comedies in their own vein, and that's not for everybody. It's certainly not appropriate for everybody. But while they do that, they really have honest, beautiful, sincere, emotional moments, and it always has to do with friendship or relationships, just really raw, honest, relational moments. And I didn't laugh hard. I mean, Long Shot was the hardest I laughed all year in terms of comedy, but at the same time, it was sort of a political satire. But again, the real heart of it, of two adults, one journalist, one politician, trying to find their way in terms of a vocation in this society, and trying to find meaning in their vocation, and being honest with themselves and have integrity in their vocation. Those are the underlining themes of this political raunchy comedy, Long Shot. But it just won me over. It was hilarious, but it was also sweet and sincere. And my favorite film of theirs, and with the same director, came out several years ago, called 50-50, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That's one of my absolute favorites, and this would be a very close number 2. So, Long Shot.
I have not seen 50-50 nor Long Shot.
Oh, wow, okay.
If my wife gives me permission to watch them.
I will say that pastorally, 50-50 is probably a little cleaner than Long Shot, but both are just beautiful little gems for me. Yeah.
Cool. What's your number 17?
So my number 17, I'm looking back over my list here because I'm just rearranging a few things here. I'm going to have to go with Frozen 2, I think. Frozen 2, which again I talked about previously. I really, as a sequel, it really surprised me. I thought the writers and directors really owned the subversive narrative that they had established in the first one. This is a very unusual Disney princess movie. There really is no bad guy. It's really the personal journey of our own wrestling with ourselves, coming of age, finding meaning and purpose. And again, for us as a father, sharing this with my kids, I thought this was a rich and beautiful and hilarious film. But the thing that really hit me most was this shockingly overt theme about indigenous reconciliation and colonial repentance. Like, that sounds crazy to say out loud that was in a Disney princess movie, but it was. And I found that very provocative and very powerful. And so Frozen 2.
Nice. Well, ironically, my number 17 is also an animated film. It's not Frozen 2, however. It is I Lost My Body.
Nice.
This is my favorite animated film of the year. I wanted to put another one or two on the list, but there's just so many to choose from this year.
Yeah.
But I definitely wanted to include this one. This one came out of nowhere, surprised me very much. Watched it on Netflix probably a month ago now, and it stuck with me. I watched it again since. It is not necessarily a family-friendly animated movie. It's more of a macabre story of literally, I lost my body. It's a disembodied hand, It sounds out there, it sounds strange, but just the way they cut from these scenes of this hand sort of literally like crawling around trying to get back with the host, the rest of the body, while you've got this sort of refugee young boy or teenager, I guess, struggling to come to grips with grief and loss and living in a new environment and relationship struggles. It just pulled together a lot of themes that really resonated with me, and just the artistry of the film was beautiful. The music, the dialogue, checked a lot of boxes for me when I look at what I like in an animated film in particular. And so highly recommend it. It's nominated and hopefully it will win Best Animated Feature. I Lost My Body, that's number 17. And number 16, unlike the Oscars, where there is little to no diversity in films and nominees, there will be a lot of diversity in my list.
Yep.
A lot of kudos and shout out to minority groups that have performed, directed, and number 16 is the first of a few on my list, Just Mercy.
Nice.
Just Mercy, starring Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx. Saw this here a couple weeks ago. Oh man, I cried my eyes out, which I do often in movie theaters. Just puts its finger, rightly so, on issues of racial injustice and incarceration. And it's basically, without spoiling too much of the film for those who haven't seen it, Jamie Foxx plays someone who's been wrongly convicted and he's on death row. Michael B. Jordan, this young up and coming Harvard graduate law school, goes down to the southern states to start basically a ragtag kind of law firm to help those that are on death row or perhaps wrongly accused, which many sadly were and continue to be. And Jamie Foxx, he could have deserved a nomination for this. It gripped me, it hit me. There was one scene in particular, a lengthy scene, that really, really struck a chord with me emotionally and was just so heart-wrenching. And so this is a film that struck a chord with me. It hits on some themes of injustice and violence and capital punishment, which is very close to my heart. And so yeah, it's number 16, Just Mercy.
Nice. Number 16. So my 16, well, I think it'll be similar to the comment you said about Little Women. My 16 is Parasite. And I should say that
I'm glad it's on there.
well, and it was close. I will say that Parasite, I've watched it twice, and that second viewing was really important for me. That second viewing really allowed me to kind of lose myself in it a bit more and not just admire the incredible work that it is, but really kind of get lost in the emotions of it. And yeah, so Parasite, I know you'll say have plenty about it when we get closer to the top. But Bong Joon-ho is an incredible filmmaker. I've loved him for years. My favorite film of his is Snowpiercer. That's a total masterpiece, fantasy, whatever, socioeconomic commentary film. Crazy and fun adventure. But Parasite is still a remarkable work of art. And it deserves any of the Oscars or all the recognition it's getting this coming weekend. So
Couldn't agree more.
yeah, so that's Parasite. That's my 16. So if I can go up to 15, I'm going to have to go with The Public. And The Public is a little film from Emilio Estevez, who's made a sort of below the mainstream notoriety of a career as a writer-director. He's been doing it for decades, but has only made a handful of films, and they're all good, but they're not necessarily all great. And but The Public, I don't know, got me in a different way. And ironically, it's a very, very simple story. It's even a little preachy. There's no subtlety about it. But at the same time, using the public library in American society to highlight, to spotlight the voiceless and the marginalized, specifically the homeless, and to give them a voice and give a story to their needs. And in the midst of that, it's a film that really can be shared by the family. I watched it with my kids a second time, and I just thought it was really an important message, important story. And on top of that, there's a couple of great performances. Alec Baldwin is incredible in The Public, and so is Jeffrey Wright. There's other great performances in it, but those two really stand out. to me in that little film, The Public. So that's my 15.
Nice. Where are we at here? That was your 16 or 15?
So that was my
That was your 15.
15,
After
I
Parasite,
think.
16, yeah. Okay, so my 15, these are tight. I mean, these could
Yeah.
flip-flop from here on up any day of the week. But 15, I put Knives Out.
Nice.
This is just a really fun, sort of exhilarating film. I thought I would like it, but I liked it more than I thought I would. Rian Johnson has crafted a beautiful film here. I just love films that it's very rare, and it was refreshing this year to see so many original films. They're not just remakes or they're this tired old same genre. This is like watching an old sort of Agatha Christie story or something play out on screen here. This whodunit with a superb cast and ensemble. The dialogue is just fantastic. Daniel Craig is just brilliant in this role. I really hope Rian Johnson makes a few more movies with him in this same role because it was wonderful. My wife and I went out for donuts with holes in them after the movie. If you've seen the movie, you'll want to do the same after watching this. But it was just a lot of fun. But underneath all the fun and the enjoyment, trying to figure out the twists and the turns and whodunit, under the surface there's this powerful exploration of social inequality, and we see that in a lot of other films this year, and certainly Parasite and others in our list. But so it was fun, but it left me thinking about some of these sort of themes underlying the movie as well. So kudos to Rian Johnson. Good work here with Knives Out. It's my number 15. And my number 14, this, probably more than any other movies, this is a good film, but it makes my list in particular because of the sort of visceral, emotional reaction I had, not only in the film, but leaving the film. And it's Queen and Slim. I don't know if you've seen Queen and Slim, but I had a profound experience. I mean, I basically, the last scene in this movie, I left the movie theater, I got into my car, and I had to pull my car over halfway home because I just couldn't see the road. I was crying so much. It had such an emotional reaction, something deep just sort of unlocked in me. Again, it's another film. It's basically been described, I think rightfully so, as sort of a protest art film from the Black community's perspective. It's filled with so much imagery and symbolism, and kudos to the directors. Just such a powerful movie experience. Daniel Kaluuya stars along with Jodie Turner-Smith. It's, basically starts in Cleveland, which the director has gone on record saying it starts in Cleveland because that's where the Underground Railroad story sort of ended when they came into Canada, so they intentionally chose to start there. You've got all this religious symbology in the movie. You've got crucifixes and cross, and basically most of the scenes in the movie, I noticed that right away, over the shoulders, in the houses, just to sort of underscore the importance of faith and Christianity and the struggles of oppression towards the Black community. I mean, the license plate on the car is "Trust God." Again, it's not the most subtle thing in this movie, but it's fully filled with metaphors and imagery, and you want this couple to win so bad. I mean, they're on the run from the police, and something unjust has gone down, and it's just a heart-wrenching conclusion to the film. It's worth checking out, and it left me thinking about it, not only crying on the way home, but I've watched it again since, and it's one I will continue to go to and watch with others. So number 14 for me is Queen and Slim.
Well, it's funny. I'm glad you spoke about that because it was literally the next film on my docket to watch, and I just haven't had a chance to watch it yet. So I probably will make the time to watch it this week before the Oscar broadcast on Sunday. And who knows, maybe it'll slip its way into my
and maybe I'm overselling it, but again, this is subjective, and it really hit me hard.
Well, I'll just say the way you describe it makes me think of why last year Black Klansman was so important to me. It was a protest work of art, and
this reminded me of that.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So that was your 14?
My 14. Back to you for 14 and 13.
Okay, so 14 for me was Brittany Runs a Marathon. Brittany Runs a Marathon. Can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's not at all. It was a nice surprise in the sense that I thought it was just going to be sort of a inspirational life change, maybe rom-com, but it was so much more than that. It played with those very story elements. But when it comes to the inspirational life change story arc, it really plays it really raw and real, has fun with it, lots of comedy, but really the story arc for the main character Brittany in terms of getting healthy, getting fit, turning her life around, being responsible. It does not take the formulaic route, and I really admired that, loved that. So yeah, Brittany runs a marathon. That's my 14.
Cool. That's actually the next one. My wife and I were on Amazon a couple days ago. Well, we got to watch this one together.
Yeah.
We're trying to drop a few pounds ourselves, so maybe this will help inspire us. So we'll give that one a look.
Nice. So my 13 is Us. Us, Jordan Peele's follow-up to Get Out. And that's another one that I really want to revisit. I wanted to see it a second time before finalizing my list, but didn't have the chance. But just a provocative parable. That's really what seems to be what Jordan Peele does well. And now Get Out is a masterpiece and a superior film, but Us is still, there's so much to chew on. There's so much to contemplate and discuss. But of course, most importantly, it's just a thrill ride. It's just a mystery. It's suspenseful. It's terrifying. You really have no idea what's coming. You really can't predict it. And on top of that, there's some pretty incredible performances. And many would say Lupita Nyong'o was kind of snubbed in terms of Oscar performances, but yeah, just
she wasn't the only one.
Yeah, right, not the only one. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to watch Us again. I mean, I guess because I love Get Out so much, and I was expecting like that. I think I just, and it kind of felt a tad bit flat to me. So I need to rewatch it though because that's one that needs to be viewed multiple times and discussed. I think with others. Yeah. And I think I watched that one alone in the theater. So yeah, cool. So that was your 13.
That was my 13. Yeah.
Okay. So my 13, we almost watched together.
Oh.
Remember what that might be?
What did
we were at a pastors' conference.
Oh, Peanut Butter Falcon?
Yes, yeah. We went out, a few pastors, and you weren't able to make it because some of the duties you had. Yeah. And so we went out to this little indie theater just up the road in Southern Ontario, and just really enjoyed this indie film, Peanut Butter Falcon. Apparently many others have because it made $20+ million a year.
Did really well.
But this is one of 2 films this year that have been much talked about with Shia LaBeouf. I have not seen Honey Boy, so I need to watch that one still.
Yeah.
But just a heartwarmer of a story. Any film that has a journey motif with unlikely friendships that form along the journey. Yeah. Typically, those are ones that really captivate me, and this one does that. Look at Lord of the Rings and some of those epics. So it's just this odd friendship between Shia LaBeouf's character, and he's kind of living a hard life. He's grieving the loss of his brother. There, he's making some poor choices, and through a series of random events, he comes across this middle-aged man with Down syndrome who's escaped his care facility. Zach Gottsinger is the actor's name, and they just form this unlikely friendship and this bond, and it's neat to see how they pour into each other, and both of them find healing and wholeness in unexpected ways through the influence of the other in the film. And it's got some funny moments, it's got some heartwarming moments. Great. And if you know Shia LaBeouf's story, his life story, if you see Honey Boy, you'll see that. It just sort of feeds into how he's personifying this character in the film. I watched it again with my family. I wanted to show them. They adored it as well. Yeah. And so it gets my number 13 on the list. Cool. Number 12 was on the fringe of not being on this list until I watched it a second time. And that is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That is number 12 for me. I watched this a second time just a week ago with some good friends of mine. And just really enjoyed the second viewing a lot more than the first. Maybe I was tired the first time through, but we just adored this film. I mean, we were laughing out loud at different scenes, and just to see the synergy between Leo and Brad, just a couple of scenes that just. This is Tarantino at his most melancholy, nostalgic. This is sort of his love letter to Hollywood. Yeah. Melancholy until the last 15 minutes, of course. No spoilers there, but but yeah. So the second viewing, this is top 3 Tarantino films from my vantage point, and design was awesome as well. Really did it, and so this clocks in at number 12 for me. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm glad you said that because I know I'm looking forward to watching, as I said at the beginning, watching that again and seeing if it changes a second viewing for me. Why don't you finish out your bottom 9 there for us? Do you want me to go with my number 11? 11, yeah. Okay. So this is probably the biggest surprise on my list at large. because it's probably the worst movie poster of the year. And I don't judge movies by posters, but this one was horrible. Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo.
Oh.
It's just him like sitting in a car with an awkward look on his face. And I'm like, it was here at our local theater, and I passed it up for weeks. And finally, I read a couple positive reviews.
Okay.
I listened to Chris Stuckman was talking about it. I'm like, you know what? I'll check it out. So the last day in theater, I went to see it, and I was like, wow, this. I mean, it was in my top 10 for a while. This is a phenomenal performance by Mark Ruffalo.
Nice.
It's a sobering but very important sort of look at corporate greed at all costs and the consequences. There's one scene in this movie. Tim Robbins, he has a minor role in this movie. Good to see him back on screen. He doesn't do much lately, but there's one scene that it's the only scene in a movie theater that I literally jumped out of my seat, stood up and clapped and went, yeah!
Nice.
And so it had a surprising emotional impact on me. I mean, I knew a little bit about the story, the true story that it's based on, but to see the sort of gory, sobering details on the screen, and this is some of Ruffalo's best work in recent years. So, number 11, Dark Waters.
Nice. That's a good bottom 9 for 2019. That's solid. So to finish out my bottom 9, my number 11, my number 12, they're very closely related in a lot of different ways. And in some ways I have a hard time parsing them out, but I'll just talk about them together. My number 12 is The Lighthouse. My number 11 is Midsommar. And these are two films, bizarre, terrifying, disturbing, enchanting, entrancing works of art by two young filmmakers, probably our two greatest young filmmakers working today. For both of them, this was their second features. Really kind of amazing what they've both done in their careers. But of course, they're both working in sort of the horror genre to different ways, and it's not for everybody. But I have such great admiration for their incredible work, visually and narratively. So my number 12 is The Lighthouse, which I thankfully had the fortune of just watching this weekend, and I needed to watch it twice. So I watched it a second time, and I'm really glad I did, because there was just so much going on in this film, and there was so much really to even visually adjust to, that I missed a lot the first time. And so I'm really glad I watched it a second time. And really, The Lighthouse, to me, the only thing stopping it from being in my top 10 is just that it's just this wildly entertaining descent into madness, and it really doesn't leave you much to really chew on or think about in the end. It's just this dark, perverse comedy, and you don't expect it to be so funny as it is, but it's just a wildly entertaining film. Two of the best performances of the year for Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. There's just so much to admire and love about that film, and I really do look forward to watching it again, because it's just a trip. And very closely, neck and neck, my number 11 is Midsommar. And the reason why Midsommar ekes it out a little bit is because it really does, as a fairy tale, a folk horror film, is what Midsommar is, and it really does provide a lot of things to think about and wrestle about and discuss in terms of religion and philosophy and things like that. It's again, it's not a film for the light of heart. It's a very dark and disturbing film. It's a hard one for me to recommend to anybody.
I will never sleep with the lights on again after watching that movie, because it's all in the daytime, which is unique for a horror movie.
Right. Oh, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I know I need to see it a second time, but I know it's going to be hard to watch it a second time, because it is so disturbing, but it is so well done, and it gets under your skin and it stays there. But it provokes so much fascinating thought. Anyways, Midsommar, it's a trip, but it's not for everyone, and that's my number 11.
Yeah, Florence Pugh is amazing in that movie.
Amazing.
I mean, she's had quite the year.
Yeah.
That one did make my top 19, probably because I won't ever watch it again. But I'm glad I did once. It gave me something to think about. But interestingly enough, so my number 10 is The Lighthouse.
Nice.
And it did squeeze into my top 10. It was higher up earlier in the year. I saw this. I was really glad. I was really pumped that this came to our local Cinefest Film Festival back in September. And the first time I watched it, I've seen it twice. The first time I watched it was the fourth movie I'd seen that day. So it was literally a marathon. Boom, 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 boom. So this was one I was most excited for, but I was so tired. It was a long, exhausting day. And I enjoyed it. Saw it with some friends. Actually, someone who was part of the production design team was sitting right in front of me, so I had a great conversation with him. He happened to be there, just about the struggles with constructing this lighthouse in Nova Scotia on a rock during an actual major storm. Yeah. Some of the battling of the elements, so that sort of added to my appreciation of the movie. But as much as I liked it the first viewing, I think I was just so tired I didn't appreciate it. But watching it a second time, I was just so enthralled with this film. And kind of the reverse of you, I thought The Lighthouse gave me more to think and talk about than Midsommar. Cool. I mean, I'm seeing some philosophical, theological, Greek mythological themes that resonated with me. This sort of mimetic rivalry and violence between the two characters, and trying to one up and the identity issues that they're both struggling with. I resonated with a lot of it beyond just this mad descent into madness, which it certainly was. Yeah. But it's a phenomenal sort of two-hander. Nice. And I thought both of them. It's not the type of movie the Oscars like, but I would have loved to see one or both of them get nominations. But in my personal list, they would both be nominated. Again, it's not for everyone, but their performances alone is worth viewing this film. The Lighthouse is my number 10. Nice.
Okay, well, my number 10 is Wild Rose. Wild Rose is it's from the UK, and it's about a struggling, I think the real tagline is a struggling, selfish young mother from Glasgow, Scotland, who is a gifted and passionate country singer. I think that tagline is enough. It's just it's in some ways you think it's going to be formulaic in terms of a rising, struggling artist, and yet it sort of intentionally avoids all the cliches or all the formula every turn. It just goes in a beautiful path, brings me to tears. I watched it twice. A beautiful mother-daughter story, great music, and just a real transformational piece. It's a real story of a journey of being selfish and caring about oneself to really opening up and caring for others and taking responsibility in this life. And just an inspirational, beautiful film. Wild Rose is my number 10.
Yeah, you mentioned it before I get to see it, but this is on my to-watch list very soon, so I'm looking forward to it even more now hearing your assessment of it. Cool. What's your number 9?
My number 9 is A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And it hung in my top tier for a long time, and just recently kind of started to get bumped down a little bit, and but I still just absolutely admire the direction of this film. And Marion Heller, I wish she had been nominated, because it's just, again, a very unexpected way of telling the story of Fred Rogers, a very unique way in. And visually took a surrealism approach to telling the story, which magically whisked me away. I mean, when the film opened and the little xylophone music was playing from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I immediately started to tear up. My daughter's like, already? Like I brought the whole family to see it. But that was kind of the experience the whole way through, deeply moving and emotional. And it's a fairly simple story, but told in a very unexpected way, and which then makes maybe the simplicity of the emotions all the more effective for me. And of course, Tom Hanks deserves the Oscar nomination. I think it deserved a few other Oscar nominations, but A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is my number 9.
Nice. Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. I remember sitting in the theater halfway through thinking, oh yeah, this is Tom Hanks. This is not Fred Rogers. Just so immersed himself in the character. My number 9, speaking of immersing themselves in characters, much like The Lighthouse, this is another great two-hander. Really enjoyed it. Even more second viewing. The Two Popes. The Two Popes is my number 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That surprises me. I didn't think it would be in your top.
Neither did I when I first watched it, but I watched it with my wife, and we kind of looked at each other halfway through, and we're like, this is really good. And some of the dialogue on screen we were discussing afterwards and since. And then so I invited some of my esteemed colleagues at the university where I do chaplaincy work over, So I think combined we had four of us in my basement watching it with a combined 12 theological degrees,
Nice.
11 more than usual, and one of which was a person who has met and conversed with both popes.
Wow.
So I think that added to it for me, the experience, just hearing some of the stories of watching the film. Oh, I've been there. Oh, yeah, he's walking there. He's driving there.
Wow.
That sort of added to the experience for me, which was already a good. It would have been my top 9 team, but it got to bump into the top 10 for that reason. Just you and I are pastors, and just to see these two larger than life figures. Some of the vulnerability on screen, they're wrestling, there's doubt, there's fear, there's anxiety, just the challenges that's what we face in ministry, certainly to a small degree, and I can't imagine what they're experiencing in their positions. I mean, it resonated with me, the honesty and the wrestling, and when they were able to find some shared common ground, these two very distinct and different sort of personalities forming this unlikely kind of mutual respect for one another, even though they don't always agree with one another. And it said a lot of those things that really spoke to me. So number 9 is The Two Popes.
Nice.
And I'll just jump in with my number 8 as well. Again, this one, Rising. This is one of 2 movies I've seen not once, not twice, but 3 times. Wow. And it's Jojo Rabbit. Jojo Rabbit
wow.
Is my number 8.
That surprised me again, man. Wow, your list really grew the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. I remember leaving this the first time. I was so tired when I watched this movie. I literally dozed off in 15 minutes of it. I'm like, I got to give this a second chance. Right. So I must have been off. And I watched it a second time, and I really enjoyed it. And then I left even thinking, I got to watch this with my family. I think every family, kids like, 8, 9, 10 plus, need to watch this film, need to discuss this film. Taika Waititi does, I think, a masterful job of sharing, it's somewhat controversial the way Hitler is portrayed, but it's the fact that it's portrayed through the eyes and the imagination of a 10-year-old child is just brilliant. Yeah. And it's somewhat believable that, at the time of World War II, 10-year-old boys would be infatuated. They would have this imagination about this larger-than-life figure who's going to rescue and be the savior of their nation. And so it really is. It's been described as an anti-hate satire. Yep. And I laughed, I cried, I talked about it with my family. We had some profound conversations. And so young Roman Griffin Davis does an amazing job in it. Taika Waititi playing Hitler is stellar. I mean, everything Sam Rockwell does, I'm in. I'm all in with Sam Rockwell. So, it's a funny yet profound movie, and I think it deserves viewing and discussing and applying some of the principles underneath all the satire and the comic stuff in it. So that's my number 8, Jojo Rabbit.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was the other one I couldn't remember at the beginning of the recording that I had left out, because it's not in my top 19. I've watched it a second time. And still absolutely love that film, and I got to watch it with my family. That was really important. Just didn't sneak in my top 19, but I really love that film as well. It's a good one. Yeah. Okay, so I actually, now that I'm about to say this, my number 8. I think there's a growing horror theme for me. And honestly, as I say that, over the last several years, that's a genre that for the previous 25 years of my life, I wasn't interested in, I didn't understand and couldn't appreciate. But I don't know, something about aging and parenting and life and I don't know what. But I
choose your words very carefully.
I don't know. But
marriage and family life, that's horrific.
Something has, in the last several years, something has really opened me up to the horror genre and and I mean the really artistic, emotionally based. Yeah. Anyway, so there is a horror theme for me this year, and my number 8 is Doctor Sleep. And Doctor Sleep, I really, for a long time, I saw it. I was really excited to see it because the writer-director is Mike Flanagan, who in those years of me growing an appreciation for the horror genre, he's kind of slowly become front and center for me. I really love Mike Flanagan. I love his work. Everything has a rich, meaningful, emotional center to everything he does. And of course, he's also a master of creep and tone and atmosphere and scary stuff. but I really love what he does. So when I knew he was doing the sequel to The Shining with Stephen King's blessing, because Stephen King notoriously hated what Kubrick did to his novel on the cinema, even though it's a masterpiece and historic film. I thought Mike Flanagan was the one human being who could tackle such a difficult wire work of adapting the novel, Stephen King's novel, Doctor Sleep, but also making it a proper sequel to Kubrick's Shining. And upon second viewing, it's so layered, it's so complex. There's so many incredible performances. Flanagan it's visually, it's nothing like The Shining. Flanagan has his own visual way of telling the story. He's not trying to imitate Kubrick and The Shining at all. He really sets himself apart, and he tells this deeply dark, disturbing, but rich and meaningful story in a very powerful, but it just, there's so much going on. There's so many incredible performances. Honestly, Rebecca Ferguson, I really wish she had been noticed or recognized for her performance, as well as the little girl who's in it, and I can't think of her name, but just stellar film. Yeah, gonna be a favorite of mine for a long time. So Doctor Sleep is my number 8.
All right, I'm not a horror guy, but you talked me into, maybe I'll do a double billing and watch The Shining and have back to back one night.
Well, I definitely recommend that. You've got to watch The Shining or rewatch it before watching Doctor Sleep.
It's been years since I've seen The Shining, so yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So then my number 7, I think a hard swing the other way. My number 7 is Marriage Story. Marriage Story, Noah Baumbach.
Bit of a horror movie.
Bit of a horror movie. It's true. A bit of a horror movie, emotional horror movie. Actually, you know what? And here's the truth about Marriage Story. I love Noah Baumbach. I love Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson. I knew it was going to be a great film, but I really was thinking it was going to be a downer. And so I kept putting it off. I'm like, tonight's not the night I want to feel all sad and depressed. And finally, when I got around to it, it's not that at all. And I'm really glad it surprised me. And no surprise is the dialogue is remarkable and incredible. Baumbach is an incredible writer, and he's very picky on set, I've heard and read, in terms of how the actors stick to the script. But Marriage Story is it is sad, but it is so truthful and beautiful and hopeful about committed relationships, even though it's a story of divorce. And it really lingers with me, and I've only seen it once, but I really look forward to seeing it a second time. But it made a big impact on me, and so Marriage Story is my number 7.
Cool. Yeah, I need to give that one a second look. As much as I admire the performances in it, it just didn't have the same emotional connection with me. Maybe I'm not big on Baumbach as you are, but I'm probably going to give it a second look with my wife. But definitely appreciate the performances. Laura Dern's probably going to walk away with some gold there on Sunday night. But
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Okay, my number 7. No coincidence, I'm wearing my San Francisco 49ers, number 7. We're recording this the day after the Super Bowl. So congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs and the great state of Missouri. My number 7, not coincidentally, is really a hidden gem that probably a lot of people haven't even heard about. And kudos to A24 for everything they produce. This one's called The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Let's give it up for Joe Talbot. This is his directorial debut.
Yeah.
And my goodness, this is a visually and poetically stunning film.
Yes.
I knew I would like it, but I was pleasantly surprised from what I saw. Jonathan Majors does an amazing job. Again, this is one of those friendship films I mentioned with Peanut Butter Falcon. Mm-hmm. This seemingly unlikely friendship between these two black men in the San Francisco area. And it really is a film. It probes the themes of gentrification and really the themes of lying and the lies we consciously or subconsciously tell ourselves to ease the pain of change and loss in life. And the way this was depicted, I mean, just the cinematography in this film, the dialogue, Danny Glover's in it. I mean, it was just beautiful. It was just, I can't really say more than that. It was a beautiful film that spoke to my heart. And it's one I could see myself going back to every year watching this just with a glass of wine, just enjoying it. Yeah, it spoke to me, and
Absolutely.
I'm really excited to see what Mr. Talbot does in the future. This is his first swing at a full-length feature. He's done a great job. So, number 7, Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Yep.
And number 6.
Can I actually just bounce off of that? Because my number 6 is the same film. My number 6 is The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and everything you just said is like, it's just an incredible, powerful film. It's whimsical. The visual style is almost like a Wizard of Oz, and of course, there's even a reference to Wizard of Oz early on in the film, just to know that you're not crazy for thinking that. There is just this beautiful, magical way of telling this story. And again, the relationship and gentrification towards the climax of the film, one of the main characters, he dramatically and emotionally blurts out, "Let us have the courage to look beyond the stories we're born into," and that's the tagline. That's the power of this film. So I'm right with you. That's my number 6.
Cool. That's awesome. We're on the same page there. I wonder if your next one will be my next one too. So my number 6 is The Irishman.
Nice.
And my goodness, this is Scorsese. I mean, Scorsese's done a lot of masterpieces, and I don't throw that word around lightly, but he is a masterful director. This is top shelf Scorsese, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I will go so far as to say I enjoyed The Irishman. This will be heresy for some, more than Mean Streets, more than Goodfellas even.
Yeah. Yeah, me
and
too.
it's the last half hour that seals that for me. I know 3.5 hours long is a put off for some, but he's been working on this baby for over a decade.
Yeah.
I mean, you get Joe Pesci to come out of retirement to join Pacino and De Niro. So I knew I was going to love this movie from the get-go. But, man, I almost see this in parallel or comparing and contrasting with some of his other gangster-related films.
Yep.
And whereas the other ones are sort of glorifying that in a sense, this is sort of the antidote for those who maybe grew up wanting to be a gangster or live that lifestyle, because it just shows the sobering sort of end to a self-serving sort of selfish lifestyle. And you see, not to spoil it, but you see Robert De Niro in the twilight of the film, and some of those final scenes are just so haunting and so gripping. But I mean, from a technical standpoint, the de-aging technology that was used in this film, some people have been poo-pooing on that. I didn't even notice it.
No, I thought it was incredible.
Wonderful. I thought it was just incredible.
Yeah.
And these 3 actors, they're just, I mean, they're just at the top of their game in this film. It didn't feel like 3.5 hours to me.
Correct.
And I know some people, because on Netflix you can go watch an hour here and an hour there. I really encourage people who haven't watched it, take the time out to watch it start to finish. You'll appreciate it so much more when you do so. It probes a lot of themes and just top-notch performances. And this is Scorsese sort of in the twilight of his life and career. You can tell, much like in Silence, my favorite Scorsese film, very similar to he's pondering, he's reminiscing here, he's reflecting, he's got some things to say that maybe he didn't say 20, 30, 40 years ago as he's getting to the twilight of his life, and those sort of leak out in this film. So I thought it was beautiful and well deserving of 10 nominations, although it probably won't win many, if any.
True.
But number 6 is The Irishman for me.
Well, and I'll jump in there because The Irishman is my number 5. So I like where this is going. And again, you're bang on. The Irishman is my number 5 for all the same reasons. When Scorsese tells a crime story, it's never about the crime; it's about the criminal's soul, and this one, like, that's undeniable because it's just the center of the film all the way through. And it is, I think, the biggest snub of the year is that De Niro did not get a nomination, nor is he going to win one because of it. But this is De Niro's best performance, in my opinion. It haunts me, the scene, and I can't say much about it, but the scene where he has to make a decision. In a diner, his eyes, his face in that scene, it broke me. It's just powerful. And then there's a subsequent scene where he's again doing the same contemplation, and it's a powerful, powerful film. At the end of it, and again, as pastors, knowing the ethos of this very intimately, but so therefore I find more meaning from it. But when I came to the end of this 3.5 hours, I felt like I had just attended a very meaningful funeral. And funerals mean a lot to me. And
That'd be a long funeral.
that's a long funeral. But that same sense of sober reflection and emotion and facing one's own mortality that's what Scorsese does here with The Irishman. So that makes it my number 5.
Nice. Well, I think here's where we part ways for a couple picks, my friend. So it's been nice taking that journey together for a couple minutes. But, my number 5, this is the quintessential fun, big screen, crowd pleaser of a film. I was so glad this snuck in to be considered for Best Picture, although it has no chance. Ford v Ferrari.
Nice.
Ford v Ferrari is my number 5. I was on the edge. I'm not a car guy. I'm not a car guy at all. But this movie just drew me in. Christian Bale. I mean, everything he throws himself into, he throws himself into it. Yeah. And this character, you're rooting for him. You love him in this film. Matt Damon's wonderful as well. Seeing the interaction between the two of them is phenomenal. I mean, just from a technical standpoint, the editing and the sound mixing, I mean, 1917 will probably win those awards, but I think Ford v Ferrari should be considered for those. The race scenes, I've seen plenty of racing movies, and I've never been so captivated. You feel like you're right there with them, cheering them on at the venue. This is wonderfully directed, wonderfully acted, and it's one I'll watch. It's one that I'll pull out when I just want to sit back, crack a beer, and have just a good old time watching a fun movie with friends or family. It'll be one of my go-tos for years to come, I know. But that being said, there is some underlying, deeper themes in this film. I mean, the question that's asked right there. Have you seen it? Have you? Or
Yeah, and you're right, and it didn't make my top 19, but that father-son motif throughout it.
The father-son motif
Powerful.
And that question of who are you, that sort of bookends the movie, that struggle with identity as Matt Damon's trying to find himself after being the guy, and Christian Bale struggling with his own identity. Any movie that probes themes of identity, a couple on my wall behind me here, those draw me in. This one, underneath the surface of all the fun on the surface, there were still some of those deeper questions that I felt were being probed and prodded throughout the film. So Ford v Ferrari, my number 5.
Nice.
Back to you, sir.
Okay, so that's your number 5. So my number 4 is one you've already mentioned earlier on. It's I Lost My Body, the best animated film of the year, and it stuck in my top 3 for a long time. Just recently got bumped down to 5. It just caught me off guard. It was a film that I had no intention of seeing, and then saw that it was available, heard good things, saw it was available on Netflix, popped it on because it's a short film. I mean, not literally a short film, it's a 80-minute film, but I knew it wasn't going to require a big commitment, but it just whisked me away. It caught me in a magic, and I've seen it twice now. And for people who I know there's lots of people who don't think to give grown-up animation a chance. For me, I just tell them that I Lost My Body has the mystery of Memento and has the romance of a Terrence Malick film. That's
a really good comparison. Yeah, it
just spins this magical, bizarre, unexpected web, and of course, I say those themes all the while you're watching a severed hand walk across. I think it's Paris, a French city. And but again, it's just something to be experienced, and really wonderful film.
I agree. Wow, I knew you liked it. I didn't realize it would be so high, but yeah, I can see why. Definitely, in my opinion, also the best animated film of the year. Yeah. So that was your number 4?
That was my number 4. Yeah.
Okay. My number 4. I tried really hard to push this down lower on the list. I really did. I thought, no, and I just watched it last night after the Super Bowl.
Okay.
And it, boom, much like I Lost My Body, this one hit me like hard. And this was something that I heard about this time last year. Came out at Sundance earlier in the year, and there are a few movies every year. They make a lot of buzz earlier in the year, and they're lost, and it didn't get released till Christmas, which was a mistake in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's the movie Clemency. And much like you rightly said, Lupita Nyong'o got snubbed for an Oscar nomination. I'd like to say the same and throw my hat in the ring for Alfred. I'll say this is the best female performance I saw this year. Was by her.
Wow.
My goodness. I mean, I liked it better than another similar theme on my list, Just Mercy. As much as I like Just Mercy, this one's head and shoulders above that one, in my opinion. It's bare bones, most of the film takes place within a prison or in the home of Alfre Woodard's character. She plays a black female warden of this prison, and she's overseeing the executions of a prison. I believe it's in Ohio. Okay. And there are a few that are just so gripping. But just to see her arc throughout this movie, she's trying to be this sort of stoic individual, just doing her duty, doing what's right. She's almost trying to talk herself into believing she's doing right. She's treating these people with respect right to the end. Meanwhile, you just see how she starts to unravel, and sometimes it's not even in her dialogue, but just in her facial expressions. And lasts for 3-4 minutes of this movie, it's just her face.
Wow.
As something else is happening in the movie, and it's just wow. It's a very, very powerful film. And yeah, I just saw it last night, so maybe I'm overhyping it because I just saw it, but I think this one will stay in my top 5 for the foreseeable future, and it's one I want to watch again. Aldous Hodge plays the person on death row beautifully. Wendell Pierce, I mean, he's great in anything he touches. Yeah. He plays her husband in the film. So these are not big actors, but some of my favorite actors and actresses.
Right.
And this is it's a real close-up look at not simply the issue capital punishment, although it's very much against capital punishment, but the psychological damage it does to those who aren't even dealing in say, but they're involved in it or their job requires it.
Right.
And Woodard just knocks it out of the park. It's my number 4, Clemency.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm wondering if we have the same number 3.
Well, you did mention Mr. Malick a little while ago.
Little Mr. Malick there. Yeah, Mr. Malick, I think for me is number 3. With a Hidden Life, which, not unlike what you just said about Clemency, I just watched Hidden Life last night or yesterday afternoon. And it's a film that requires patience. You got to be honest about that up front with people. It's an almost 3 hours, not quite 3 hours. It's a long film, and it takes its time. And I'll be honest too, in recent years, Malick's films have not gripped me in the same way that a lot of other people have, yourself included. There are some of those films in recent years that I need to revisit and give another look. I mean, I've always admired him. I love his work and the themes. But honestly, A Hidden Life gripped me like none of his other films. I couldn't shake it. It was emotionally just wrecking me. It was just the love, the passion of this husband and wife in Austria. He called to duty by the Nazi regime and him refusing to fight or pledge allegiance to Hitler. True story, but this quiet story, this story far from the spotlight. He's just a farmer who's refusing because of his convictions and his faith. A farmer refusing to pledge allegiance to Hitler or fight, and Malick tells it in only the way he can, with sweeping visuals and patient, poetic with scenes that linger on faces and touches of the hand, and with the poetry of this film of A Hidden Life just wrecked me, and I couldn't shake it, and I knew that the theme of the film, that there was so much to talk about and digest. I couldn't deny that this was an important film. This is an important story for people to see, to witness, but then to also, more importantly, to discuss. So it's my number 3.
And coincidentally, it is my number 3 as well. For all the reasons you stated, I thought it was such an important film that I pre-bought an entire movie theater downtown, and we hosted a movie screening. Awesome. And a friend of mine at the university, and had a bit of a discussion around it, and that was a powerful experience. I had watched it, previewed it myself personally, to watch it with a group of friends and colleagues, and to discuss and shed some tears together. And I actually oversold the theater by 1 seat, so I'm sitting there on a fold-up chair. Oh, wow. Halfway through, I'm like, this is uncomfortable. I'm like, wait a minute, I am not suffering compared to what I'm seeing on the screen right now. What to complain about it. But yeah, I mean, Malick, I love and respect Malick so much. Tree of Life is in my top 3 all time, and this is not far behind, in my opinion. Yeah. He's back after a few really outside the box experimental projects. I'm really now excited to see what he does next, because spoiler alert, he's finished already shooting a film about Christ, weaving some of the parables of Christ together in sort of a dark genre theme. So I'm really fascinated to see, maybe this time next year we'll be talking about that one. But Hidden Life, it's a slow burn. Again, full disclosure, almost 3 hours. But you almost need time. You feel so emotionally invested and aware of the family and the life, the simple, beautiful life they live together, and to see the temptation that comes his way throughout the film. Well, just sign off on this. You're not going to change anything. But he sticks, to his morals and his ethics at the ultimate cost. I mean, he's a martyr in the truest and best sense of the word, and it has a lot to speak into our lives and how we live today. Right? I don't think it's a coincidence that he released this movie in the day and age in which we live, and it'll be talked about for years. I think it'll be underappreciated this year. Didn't get any nominations, sadly, but it's one that I think history will look back upon very fondly. So it's my number 3 as well, Hidden Life.
Awesome.
Down to top 2.
Do we have the same number 2? I'm going to go with Ad Astra. Ad Astra is my number 2. So, and Ad Astra, I have deep love for. I know we both do.
Come on, Brad, crack a smile for us.
Right. Listen, I'll just give a little fanfare. Writer director James Gray. I've been a huge fan of him for years. He is he's probably maybe the most unrecognized living filmmaker, American filmmaker right now, who has established an incredible career and legacy with his films. So many of his stories over the years have meant so much to me. His last film was my favorite of his, a masterpiece called The Lost City of Zed from a couple years ago. Before that was The Immigrant, which was in my top of that year as well. And he's done several films with Joaquin Phoenix, which should say a lot. And anyways, he's an incredible writer and director. And Ad Astra is his most theological, and that's of course partially why this one hit you and I so much. But it is overtly theological, maybe in an unexpected way. It's no simple profession of faith. It might not be any profession of faith, but it wrestles with that meaning of why we're here and are we alone in the universe. And Brad Pitt is incredible. Brad Pitt is the bomb. He's amazing. This is his best or second best performance. I know we've talked about before, but he's an incredible actor, and this is the pinnacle of his performance. And watching Ad Astra a second time and owning it now, I'm just in love with it, mesmerized by it. And it's a film that everyone really needs to see and wrestle with. So I don't know why you build upon that. I know you have lots of wonderful things to say about it too.
Yeah. So my number 2, not Ad Astra.
What?
Number 2 is Parasite.
Whoa.
You can flip a coin with these two.
Yeah.
This is kind of anticlimactic. They've been over my shoulder the whole time here.
I totally thought Parasite was your number 1.
Parasite, I think, is the best film of the year. Now, when I say best, I'm looking at, I think it's the best designed, produced, directed film of the year. Cool. But I gotta give a slight edge to Ad Astra as my favorite, the one that resonated with me for the reasons we discussed at the outset of this podcast. But it's splitting hairs. I love them both so much. But let me just talk about Parasite, and then I'll come back to Ad Astra after I hear your number 1. But Parasite, I am really hoping history is made Sunday night at the Oscars. I would love to see this film win Best Picture. And I say best, but I enjoyed this. I went into this movie cold. I watched it early on. It's got a lot of buzz now. If you haven't seen Parasite and you're watching this, don't run to read about it. I would recommend you go cold. Yeah. Would you agree with that? I think you'll be shocked and awed by the dialogue, the production design, the twists and turns throughout the film, and the overarching narrative of social inequality, which Bong, the director, is no stranger to. You mentioned Snowpiercer earlier. I mean, he's explored these themes before, but I know you're beating the Snowpiercer drum, but for me, this is Bong's best work. This is a masterpiece in the truest and best sense of the word. I've beaten this drum far and wide, and telling friends to see this, and family and others. Man, just so much. And I've been watching. So now after school, being cool. I've been watching so many podcasts and reading so many things about it. Just the attention to detail. I have so much respect and admiration. I mean, they've built a lot of this production design from the ground up. The large home where a good chunk of the movie is filmed, and then the other neighborhood. It really, the families on the poster here, the Kim family and the Park family, just compares and contrasts them. You've got literally the higher up family living higher up, the down and outs in the semi-basement. I think why I like it maybe more than some on this side of the world is I lived in South Korea for 2 years. So I saw that social inequality firsthand. I taught English as a second language to some people that live in some exquisite conditions. And I traveled around that country, and I saw that reminded me of my time, a very transformational time living there. But even disregarding all that, this is a wonderful film. It's probably in my top 10 of the decade. Both these two films would be in the top 10 of my decade. So Parasite is my number 2. And let's hear about your number 1.
Okay.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
The one I started with.
That's right. We begin and end in the same spot. My number 1.
Little Women.
Little Women. I just, for the first time I saw it, I knew it was going to stay at number 1 for me. I had just such a deep emotional experience with it. For so many reasons, but certainly one of the most emotional reasons is just the being a father of 2 daughters. That was the portrayal of daughterhood and sisterhood, and just the kinetic energy of the family home and the family relationships, the chaos, the beauty, the tender moments, were portrayed in a way that never has the Alcott's book been portrayed before. And literary, in terms of literary adaptation, that's another reason why I just love and was swept away by this. Again, portrayed, adapted in a way never done before, reconstructing of the timeline to provide very different emotional, cathartic moments as a result of telling the story in a different way. And then just incredible performances. This is a familiar story, but told in an unorthodox way, with performances bringing to light things about these characters never portrayed before on film, maybe on stage too. And top to bottom, the cast is incredible, from Saoirse Ronan to Florence Pugh to the mother. I'm on drawing a blank. Who's nominated for Marriage Story, Laura Dern, and just the rest of the cast. I mean, it's just incredible performances. I saw it twice. I got to take my daughters the second time, and this is a true personal pick. I mean, I really admire the writing, the cinematography, the choices that were made by Greta Gerwig to tell this in a 21st century way. Really, just masterclass. And I just love Little Women, and that's my number 1.
Coming back around, Ad Astra, I do give the nod to Ad Astra.
Yep.
Saw this on my anniversary weekend with my wife. Again, went in cold, not knowing much about the film. Love Brad Pitt, love Gray as a director, as you do, and it just blew me away. I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I think this, go on record again saying this, I think this is Brad Pitt's best performance. So when he wins the Oscar for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
yep,
I will be clapping for him for his life's work before this movie right here.
Yep.
And again, much like Alfred Woodard in Clemency, it's not simply what he says, but what he says with his eyes, what he says with his body language,
yep,
the angst, this journey as he's going literally across the galaxy, as he's further away from Earth. He's becoming more and more vulnerable. He's unlocking some things that he's been sort of suppressing and stuffing for years in that father-son relationship. It probes philosophical and theological questions, as you've alluded to. And it hit me on so many levels. This is one that I bought it as soon as it came out on Blu-ray. I've seen it 3 times. I watched it with my kids, and they enjoyed it as well. We had a good cry together. So kudos to Brad Pitt, James Gray, Ad Astra, both of us, we love it. And just edges out Parasite for my favorite of the year.
Nice.
So there we go. There's our 19 of 19. What a year for movies.
Yeah, man. That's
enjoy the Oscars.
The list. It'll be fun. It'll be fun to see some of our picks, see if some pull it away at the Oscars on Sunday night.
Yeah. So by my count, we had 8 crossovers.
Okay.
It's not quite as many as we suspected, but I had a couple I've been jotting down that I haven't seen, and maybe you likewise. So
nice.
maybe we'll do another one of these down the road and compare notes after
Absolutely.
the Oscars.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
All right. Enjoy the evening. I know it's your Super Bowl, so have fun.
All right. We'll see you.
Chat again soon. Bye.